high-level overview of the basics, as it were, of what it would take to sell groups with us. And so we'll cover some small details. My hope, my goal is basically at the end of the time that we have together, leave you in a position where you've got something that you can consider moving forward as an additional part of what you do with Seven Corners. I think the most basic way, and maybe it's a cliche, that we can look at what we're going to talk about today is when asking yourself, or when I have been asked in the past, who are our clients, who are the potential customers that we can consider for the products that we're talking about, it would be anybody that has luggage. And so one of the things I'll do at the top of our webinar is to challenge you as you move off into your day after this webinar to start asking your clients over the course of, say, the next month, if they have travel plans for the coming part of the year. So be thinking things like spring breaks, which are fortunately just around the corner, graduation trips that will be happening many times in kind of early midsummer, and then as people are having their kids get out of school and so forth, and considering plans for the summer. Those are the kinds of things that I'll just plant that seed at the top end of the webinar for you to consider moving forward. But the simple fact is that just about anyone is a potential client, and most individuals are either going to be traveling or as an individual, or are part of some kind of group, and we'll talk about those groups here in just a moment, or the kinds of groups in just a moment, that are going to be traveling on a regular basis. So to that end, let's take a look at just a few of the target markets that really should be a part of your consideration. For those of you who are selling, for example, in the employee benefits space, so maybe your primary focus is in selling small group products, whether it be health products or ancillary benefits and that kind of thing, be considering whether or not you know that they've got employees who travel on a regular basis. For example, maybe they've got a few key employees that will travel, once a year to conference, for example, or maybe they've got a team of people who travel around to conferences on an ongoing basis. It could be any number of things, ranging from just covering them if they have an accident while traveling for business, up through and including things like protection against a loss if they've had to cancel the trip, something happens maybe with the business and they aren't going to be sending that team off to that conference, protecting that investment that they've outlaid in, whether it be fees for the hotels or transportation and that kind of thing. And it can range all the way down to 24-hour benefits by way of assistance. So they're in another country and they need to be able to have someone on a 24-hour basis provide them assistance and direction, maybe getting from where they are to some kind of medical provider. So again, to kind of summarize that particular bullet point, if you're working in a space where you're working with businesses of whatever size and they have employees that are going to be traveling, you can cover them really kind of from soup to nuts on a variety of different plans that we will offer that cover everything, again, from AD&D to trip cancellation to, if they're traveling, say, abroad, having travel medical protection, because many businesses recognize if they're going to be sending an employee overseas that their U.S.-based health plan isn't going to offer them coverage when they're abroad in most situations, and so they want their employees to have the same kind of protection while they're working abroad as they would if they were stateside. So we've got a full suite of products, most of which can be customized in a variety of ways for the specific group needs that happen to be expressed by your clients. Schools may be one of the largest of the areas that you have access to. So as you're considering maybe your own children who are part of a group, my daughter and my oldest daughter and my wife went to China a year ago in March with a group from their school. There were about 25 students, about 30 staff and teachers from the school that all traveled for 10 days to a handful of cities in China. When they left, as part of their trip, the school district required that they have a minimum level of coverage, travel medical coverage, for when they were going to be out of the country. And it made good sense. And so as you're thinking about those students maybe that are part of whatever organization that you are a member of that are going to be traveling abroad, maybe for just a school trip like my daughter did for 10 days, or maybe they're going abroad for a summer session, or maybe going abroad even for an entire school year. There are opportunities there to have that kind of discussion with people that are parts of those school organizations. And also, we have coverage that will protect in the opposite direction. So you've got maybe an exchange student. So in the case of my daughter's school, the prior August, the kids from China, who they were going to be staying with that next March, had come to the United States and stayed in our home for 10 days. So when they went back across the pond, as it were, and stayed in China, they were staying with the kids that they had hosted. Similar kinds of things. If you know if there are students who are going to be inbound coming to the U.S. from whatever country they might be coming from, in fact, many colleges will require those students that are going to be studying on a permanent basis, say for a semester or for a school year, they will require them to have coverage. So if you've got a situation where you're working with schools and educational organizations, you want to make sure that if you've not tapped into that market, that you're considering it. And a big one, and this one is one, religious institutions, that as a collective, they tend to recognize the importance of having coverage when they're traveling abroad. So as you're having maybe your faith-based organizations that you're familiar with are sending people abroad, maybe they're digging wells or doing a Doctors Without Borders kind of thing, any number of things from short-term mission trips to long-term mission trips should be something that you consider. And again, that group as a whole tends to value and expect and have expectations of themselves before they leave the country to have that kind of protection in place that they would find important. So if you're not tapping into that market, that's one that I would say is a very viable one. And there are lots and lots of trips that are taken in an informal basis. So don't think of it as just a missions organization. Lots of churches have annual trips that the church will gather people that are just ordinary non-clergy folks that are going to be going abroad and volunteering for a period of time. So that's a very viable one to consider as well. And while this list is not exhaustive, I'll just touch on a couple other things to keep in mind as you're considering this opportunity. If you've got clients or companies in your area that have high-tech or international manufacturing presence, it's another opportunity to consider. So for example, we've got a couple of plants here in Indiana where they're high-tech and they bring people in from outside of the country to come in and provide their high-tech expertise. And because this company has lots of spots around the world where they have locations, they're sending U.S.-based employees outbound. So they've got literally employees coming and going in and out of the country, both that are U.S. employees and our foreign nationals that are coming in for short periods of time. Those kinds of groups can be ideal because it's an ongoing situation where 2 people are going and 5 are coming and 10 are going and 3 are coming, and the numbers kind of ebb and flow throughout the year. And so it can be a really good opportunity to build a larger presence, as it were, with that kind of organization, because those companies, as they grow, have more people coming and going. The premium, simply put, will continue to grow as they add people to the plan, and so it becomes a really good opportunity to build on to a book of business. If you're selling in the commercial line space anyway, if you just incorporate this talk track, as it were, into what you're already talking to them about, maybe you're talking to them about key man insurance and the other kinds of things that you might be selling in the commercial workspace, this can just be another part of the dialogue that you include, and you can be what I call an agent that has more tentacles involved. The more things that your client turns to you to consider you as the expert, the better off you are, the more difficult it's going to be for another agent to come in and try to interlope, as it were. Lastly, I'll just touch on custom groups. Simply put, groups are very loosely defined. It can be anything ranging from the group from that missions or faith-based organization to one that is maybe just a Kiwanis Lions Club kind of group that travels on either a one-off or an ongoing basis up through the companies that we just talked about a moment ago that have employees ebbing and flowing within and without of the country. So groups are a very loose thing, so you don't have to think, well, they have to have a title and they have to have a charter and they have to have, you know, a tax ID. It's really just a collective of people that are going to be traveling together or that want to have a group plan which they can participate on. And so some are going in May and some are going in June, some are going December, what have you. It's really a very open thing to consider, not a very tightly focused thing that has to be defined as it relates to being a group. Now, I know that pursuing a new opportunity can be daunting, and so one of the things I want to acknowledge is that new can sometimes be unappealing, and so I want to offer up as simple and straightforward a way as I can for you to move into the space if you'd like to. So what do we need to have you do so that we can facilitate that? Really, it's very simple. If you identify the opportunity, as I just described, are they all traveling on the same trip, or are they just going to be a member of a group and they're going to travel throughout the year at various times and in varying numbers? Is it a one-off? Does it recur throughout the year or ongoing? And what kind of protection do they need? Are they looking just to protect themselves for lost trip costs, or they need medical coverage? Do they need to protect maybe some equipment they're traveling with, that kind of thing? Once you've collected that basic information, just reach out to your sales rep. Help them understand what you've collected, and the sales rep will help you vet that opportunity so that you can move forward collectively. The sales rep will be glad, if necessary, and if you would want it, to even have a conference call with you and the business owner or the group person, if you think it's appropriate, and help you vet that opportunity together. Once they've done that, then we will cross the T's and dot the I's at that end of the spectrum. And so really, it's really just as simple as identify the opportunity, collect some basic information, and then reach out to your sales rep and let your sales rep walk you through the rest of the process. So it's not going to be a high learning curve thing in advance on your part. Collect the basic information, and we'll learn on the back end when you've got an opportunity that you've identified. Having said that, I want to say thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate it. I hope it's warmer in your neck of the woods than it is for me. If you've got some specific questions that are outside of what I covered today, again, this was hopefully just a way to wet your whistle, reach out to your sales rep. On your screen, you should see your specific sales rep and their name and number and extension. If you don't see your sales rep, by all means, just call the 800 number, and we will look you up in our system and help you identify your sales rep. If you've got questions, like I said, feel free to reach out to us. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate it. Next week, I will be spending a few minutes talking about trip cancellation coverage. If you haven't signed up for that and you're interested in learning more of a deep dive, as it were, about that particular set of products, join us next week at the same time. Otherwise, thank you so much for joining me here today, and I will talk to you all soon.